Commander Jack Whelan had been called many things in his 53 years of life: stubborn, reckless, a pain in the ass. But diplomat was a new one, and frankly it still felt like a cosmic joke. Yet here he stood, adjusting the collar of his dress uniform for the 17th time as the transport shuttle docked with the Galactic Council's orbital station. The commander, "Remember to bow 3 times when greeting the arbiters," chirped the AI assistant in his earpiece. "And for the love of Earth, please don't make any comments about the Asalani ambassador's breathing apparatus again." "That was one time," Jack muttered. "How was I supposed to know it wasn't a fancy bong?" The shuttle door hissed open, revealing the gleaming, impossibly perfect interior of Harmonia Station, headquarters of the Galactic Council and humanity's newest diplomatic headache. 2 years since first contact, 6 months since Earth had been grudgingly granted probationary member status. Humanity was the new kid in school, and most of the classroom still wasn't sure if they wanted to play nice. Jack stepped onto the polished floor that seemed to shimmer with tiny galaxies beneath his boots. The gravity felt slightly off, set to some alien standard that made his joints ache in new and creative ways. Around him, diplomats from 17 sentient species glided, skittered, or floated through the grand atrium, engaged in the delicate dance of interstellar politics. But Commander Whelan announced a melodic voice behind him. "You're 3 minutes early. Most unusual for a human." Jack turned to find Ambassador Krill, a 9-foot-tall insectoid whose carapace shimmered with iridescent blues and greens. Despite spending weeks studying xenobiology files, Jack still couldn't tell if the ambassador was smiling or preparing to lay eggs in his chest cavity. "Figured I'd break the stereotype," Jack replied with a shrug. "We humans aren't all chronologically challenged." Indeed, Krill clicked, mandibles twitching in what Jack hoped was amusement. "The summit begins in 20 minutes. I'd been assigned as your protocol officer, given the incidents with your predecessor." Ambassador Chen had a unique diplomatic style, Jack conceded, remembering the viral footage of Sarah telling the Plugarian delegation exactly where they could stick their trade regulations. "Yes, unique." Krill's antennae quivered diplomatically. "The Council is particularly interested in your presentation on human adaptability. Many species find it concerning how quickly your kind adjusts to new environments." "That's us," Jack grinned. "Throw us in the deep end, and we'll either learn to swim or build a submarine out of the debris." As they made their way toward the council chamber, Jack felt the eyes of countless aliens tracking his movements. Humans had entered the galactic stage with characteristic chaos-breaking quarantine protocols, accidentally insulting religious beliefs, and somehow managing to improve on technologies that had been standard for centuries. The air in the station felt electric with tension. Something was off. Jack had spent 20 years in Earth's military before this assignment, and his instincts were screaming that this wasn't just the usual diplomatic frost. No, this felt like the calm before an ambush. Beside him, Krill's exoskeleton clicked nervously as they approached the massive doors of the council chamber. "Commander, I should warn you that the Vex'dar delegation has been particularly vocal about their concerns regarding human integration." "The Vex'dar," Jack recalled the briefing files, "the paranoid ones with the tentacle faces who evolved on a planet with 300 different predator species." "Please refrain from such characterizations during the summit," Krill hissed urgently. "But yes, those are the Vex'dar." Jack squared his shoulders. Just another day representing the scariest newcomers to the galactic neighborhood. The summit began predictably enough. Jack found himself seated at a horseshoe-shaped table between a gelatinous blob that communicated through color changes and something that looked disturbingly like a sentient chandelier. The chandelier, which introduced itself as Lumina, a representative of the energy-based Futurians, leaned toward Jack, its crystal appendages tinkling softly. "Human Whelan," it whispered, voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Vex'dar minister has requested speaking priority 3 times already. And most unusual." Jack glanced across the chamber where the Vex'dar delegation huddled together like a mass of anxious octopi in formal wear. Their leader, Minister Vex'dar, was gesticulating wildly with 4 of his tentacles, while the others clutched what appeared to be breathing apparatuses. The Vex'dar evolved breathing pure nitrogen and oxygen environments required them to wear filtration systems that gave them the unfortunate appearance of wearing gas masks to a formal dinner. "What's their deal?" Jack whispered back to Lumina. "The Vex'dar consider themselves the guardians of galactic security." Lumina sparkled. "Any new species triggers their defensive instincts. But humans, you have them particularly agitated. Your species' ability to thrive in conditions others find lethal is disturbing to them." "We're just adaptable." Jack shrugged. "Not our fault. The universe tried to kill us so many times we got used to it." The Arbiter, a towering, four-armed being with skin like polished marble, tapped a crystalline gavel. "The Council recognizes Minister Vex'dar of the Vex'dar Confederacy." Vex'dar rose dramatically, his breathing apparatus making a wheezing sound that reminded Jack of his uncle's ancient vacuum cleaner. 6 eyes blinked asynchronously as the minister surveyed the chamber. "Esteemed colleagues," Vex'dar began, voice modulator giving his words an ominous echo, "we stand at a precipice of potential galactic destabilization. The human integration experiment proceeds without proper security protocols." Jack resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "Here we go again. Reports indicate humans can survive radiation levels that would liquidate a Thanuvian. They consume compounds toxic to 93% of Council species for pleasure. They deliberately expose themselves to microorganisms for immunological enhancement." Vex'dar's tentacles writhed in what Jack assumed was the Vex'dar equivalent of clutching pearls. More concerning. The minister continued, voice dropping to a dramatic whisper that somehow still carried throughout the chamber. "Our intelligence suggests these humans withstand psychological stressors that would drive any rational species to madness. What are we inviting into our galactic community? Predators? Conquerors? Or something worse?" From the corner of his eye, Jack noticed a smaller Vex'dar slip out of the chamber. Something about the way it moved, furtive, purposeful, sent Jack's instincts into overdrive. Krill leaned over, mandibles close to Jack's ear. That was Dr. Morval, their chief psychochemist. Strange that he would leave during his minister's address. "Very strange," Jack murmured, watching as another Vex'dar followed shortly after. "All very convenient." Jack half listened as Vex'dar continued his fear-mongering, cataloguing every exit and strategic position in the room, an old habit from his military days. That's when he noticed the subtle changes in the environmental controls near the human delegation. The ventilation ducts had shifted alignment, almost imperceptibly. "Ambassador Krill," Jack whispered, "is there some reason the air circulation would be directed specifically at the human section?" Krill's compound eyes swiveled to observe the vents. "No, that is highly irregular." As Vex'dar's speech reached a crescendo about the unpredictability of humans, Jack was already piecing together what was happening. The Vex'dar weren't just afraid of humans, they were planning something. And from the increasingly obvious adjustments to the environmental systems, they intended to make their point very publicly. Lumina dimmed slightly as it leaned toward Jack again. "Commander, I believe I should inform you that the Vex'dar are renowned for their chemical weapons research. It is, after all, how they survived their evolutionary history." "Let me guess," Jack said, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline now pumping through his system. "They specialize in compounds affecting neurological responses. Fear toxins, perhaps?" "Indeed," Lumina chimed softly. "How did you know?" Jack grinned tightly. "Because if I were a paranoid species worried about dangerous newcomers, I'd want to prove my point by making them lose their minds in front of the entire council." Across the chamber, Minister Vex'dar was watching Jack with all 6 eyes, tentacles curled in anticipation. The trap was set, and Jack had walked right into it, or so the Vex'dar thought. After the council session adjourned for their customary mid-summit recess, Jack found himself cornered by a contingent of Vex'dar diplomats. Minister Vex'dar's breathing apparatus made a sound suspiciously like someone trying to suppress excitement. "Commander Whelan," the minister burbled through his translator, "we were most impressed by your composure during our address. Many species find our directness challenging." Jack smiled blandly. "Minister, I've been yelled at by drill sergeants with veins popping out of their foreheads. Your concerns about humanity seem downright gentle by comparison. The minister's tentacles writhed in what might have been discomfort or amusement. Jack couldn't tell which. Perhaps we have misjudged your capacity for diplomatic discourse. Would you honor us with a private meeting? Dr. Morville has prepared a presentation about our species' security concerns that might illuminate our perspective. Bingo. Jack had suspected they'd try something like this. The public spectacle hadn't materialized during the council session, so now they were moving to Plan B. I'd be delighted, Jack said, noting how Krill's antennae suddenly went rigid beside him. After all, understanding is the foundation of trust. Commander, Krill whispered urgently, private meetings with the Vex'dar are highly irregular. Perhaps we should. Nonsense, Jack interrupted cheerfully. The minister has extended a professional courtesy. It would be rude to decline. Vex'dar's eyes blinked in sequence, like a bizarre countdown. Excellent. Please follow my aide to our diplomatic suite. Dr. Morville awaits us there. As Jack followed the Vex'dar contingent down a series of increasingly remote corridors, he activated the subdermal emergency tracker embedded in his wrist, standard procedure for human diplomats ever since the Arcturian handshake incident, that had left Ambassador Chen with 3 fewer fingers than she'd arrived with. The Vex'dar diplomatic suite felt like entering an aquarium designed by a paranoid goth. Dim blue lighting cast eerie shadows across walls draped in flowing black membranes. The air was noticeably cooler and carried a faint metallic tang that made Jack's nose twitch. In the center of the room stood Dr. Morville, a smaller Vex'dar whose tentacles were adorned with intricate metal rings denoting scientific achievement. Before him was a holographic display showing what appeared to be human neurological patterns alongside chemical compounds that Jack didn't recognize. Commander Whelan. Dr. Morville's voice modulator had a higher pitch than the minister's, giving him an almost gleeful tone. Such an honor to meet Earth's representative. Your species' neurochemistry is absolutely fascinating. Thanks, Jack replied dryly. We grew it ourselves. The doctor's tentacles wiggled in apparent delight. Humor. Another uniquely human trait. You use it to diffuse tension, yes? A remarkable psychological adaptation. Jack noticed that the other Vex'dar had positioned themselves near the exits. Minister Vex'dar moved to a control panel on the wall, subtly adjusting settings while pretending to be interested in a decorative sculpture. So, Doctor, Jack said casually, what's this presentation about? The minister mentioned security concerns. Yes, Dr. Morville waved a tentacle enthusiastically. You see, throughout galactic history, new species integration has followed predictable patterns. But humans, his voice dropped to a reverent whisper, humans defy all established models. We get that a lot, Jack said, surreptitiously checking the room's ventilation system. Just as he suspected, the vents had been reconfigured to direct airflow specifically toward where he stood. For instance, continued Dr. Morville, completely oblivious to Jack's assessment, all sentient species have evolved threat response mechanisms, fight or flight, as you call it. But humans, the doctor's eyes widened dramatically, humans sometimes respond to threats by approaching them, studying them. It's madness. We call it science, Jack shrugged. Or sometimes just Tuesday. Minister Vex'dar moved closer, tentacles twitching nervously. What the esteemed doctor is trying to convey, Commander, is that such unpredictability presents a genuine security concern. How can we integrate a species whose reactions we cannot anticipate? Jack noticed a subtle shift in the air circulation. Here it comes. Perhaps, Dr. Morville suggested, eyes blinking rapidly. A demonstration would help illustrate our point. A demonstration? Jack asked innocently, even as he heard the soft hiss of something being released into the air ducts. Yes, the doctor said, all 6 eyes now fixed intently on Jack. You see, across all documented sentient species, certain stimuli produce universal responses. Fear, for instance, manifests in remarkably similar physiological patterns. The air around Jack began to take on a faint greenish tinge. A mist so subtle it was barely visible started swirling around his ankles, slowly rising. "Is this where you're supposed to announce your evil plan?" Jack asked, making no move to escape the spreading vapor. "Because I've got to tell you, the whole trap the human in a room and monologue at him thing feels a bit cliché." Dr. Morville's tentacles froze in confusion. By now, the gas had enveloped Jack completely, a pale green cloud that smelled vaguely of sulfur and something else, oddly familiar. The Vex'dar watched in anticipation, clearly expecting Jack to collapse into a gibbering, terrified mess. Instead, he took a deep breath, furrowed his brow thoughtfully, and then asked, "Is someone cooking cabbage? Maybe with some, I want to say, benzene undertones, little hint of sulfur dioxide?" The silence that followed was so complete that Jack could hear the soft gurgling of the Vex'dar's breathing apparatuses. That's not possible," Dr. Morville whispered, tentacles drooping in disbelief. "The phobaxine compound affects all known sentient neural structures." Jack sniffed again and grinned. "Honestly, it just smells like home." The Vex'dar diplomatic suite erupted into chaos. Dr. Morville frantically checked his instruments, tentacles flying over control panels with the desperation of a scientist watching his life's work crumble before his eyes. Minister Vex'dar had backed against the wall, all 6 eyes wide with what Jack recognized as pure, unadulterated panic. "The concentration is 30 parts per million." Dr. Morville shrieked. He should be experiencing terror beyond comprehension. Heart palpitations, involuntary muscle spasms, the overwhelming dread. Jack casually leaned against a nearby table, watching the Vex'dar melt down with undisguised amusement. "Sorry to disappoint, Doc. But this stuff," he waved his hand through the green mist still swirling around him, "smells like Tuesday morning in Elizabeth, New Jersey circa 2035. The door to the suite burst open as Krill and Lumina rushed in, followed by several council security officers. They stopped abruptly, taking in the bizarre tableau, Jack standing calmly in a cloud of fear gas while the Vex'dar delegation fell apart around him. "Commander Whelan." Krill's mandibles clicked in alarm. "Are you injured? Our sensors detected an unauthorized chemical release in this sector." "I'm fine," Jack assured them. "The Vex'dar were just conducting a little experiment. Weren't you, Minister?" Vex'dar's tentacles drooped in what appeared to be the Vex'dar equivalent of abject humiliation. Lumina's crystalline structure pulsed with concerned light. "This is phobaxine gas, a Class 3 prohibited substance under Council law. It targets anxiety receptors in the brain, amplifying fear responses by several thousand%. Does it now?" Jack took another exaggerated sniff. "Honestly, it reminds me of growing up. I lived downwind from 3 chemical plants, 2 oil refineries, and what was officially listed as a fragrance development facility, but what everyone knew was just a fancy way of saying we make things smell less terrible than they actually are." The security officers were now frantically working to ventilate the room, while Dr. Morville had collapsed into what appeared to be a tentacled puddle of scientific despair. But how? The doctor moaned. "The compound has been tested on over 300 species. It even works on silicon-based life forms." Jack shrugged. "Earth wasn't always the garden spot of the galaxy, you know. By the time we started cleaning up our act, humans had been breathing industrial waste for generations. My hometown had air quality warnings like other places have weather reports. Slight chance of respiratory distress with a 30% chance of eye-watering in the afternoon." Krill's antennae quivered in disbelief. "You developed immunity to neurotoxins through environmental exposure?" "Not immunity exactly," Jack clarified. "More like calibrated expectations. When your baseline includes smog thick enough to chew, your fear response gets a bit more selective about what qualifies as threatening." Jack walked over to Dr. Morville, who was still a heap of despondent tentacles on the floor, and offered a hand. "If it makes you feel any better, Doc, your fear gas is probably top-notch by galactic standards. It's just that humans come from a planet that spent a couple of centuries trying to poison itself." As the security team continued to clear the air, Jack found himself thinking about Earth, the good and the bad. The summer nights when the air smelled like a chemistry set gone wrong. The warnings not to swim in the local river unless you wanted your skin to glow in interesting new ways. The generations of humans who had weathered it all, adapted, survived, and eventually fixed just enough of the mess to avoid extinction. Lumina drifted closer to Jack, crystal facets refracting the light in patterns that somehow conveyed curiosity. In all my centuries documenting interspecies relations, I have never witnessed such a response. Most beings would be reduced to primal terror by even trace amounts of faux vaccine. Yeah, well, Jack grinned. Where I come from, we call that Tuesday. Minister Vex'dar had finally regained enough composure to speak. This was merely a security assessment, standard protocol for. Save it, Jack interrupted, his voice suddenly hard. You just violated about 15 council regulations and at least 3 interspecies diplomatic protocols. The question is, what am I going to do about it? The minister's tentacles froze mid-gesture, and all 6 eyes fixed on Jack with newfound wariness. For the first time, Jack could see that the Vex'dar weren't just annoyed by humans, they were genuinely afraid. And suddenly, Jack understood exactly how to use that fear. As the council security team escorted the Vex'dar delegation away, Jack pulled Krill and Lumina aside. The insectoid diplomat's mandibles were still clicking with agitation, while Lumina's crystalline form pulsed with what Jack had come to recognize as intense curiosity. Commander, we must report this immediately to the full council. Krill insisted. The use of prohibited neurotoxins during a diplomatic summit is grounds for. Hold that thought. Jack interrupted, a plan forming in his mind. What if we handled this differently? Lumina chimed softly. You're not suggesting we overlook a Class 3 violation? Not overlook, Jack clarified, a slow smile spreading across his face. Good leverage. 30 minutes later, Jack sat across from Minister Vex'dar in a secure conference room. The minister's tentacles were uncharacteristically still, a sign that Jack had come to recognize as extreme stress in the Vex'dar. Dr. Morville sat beside his leader, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Let's cut to the chase, Jack began, leaning forward. You tried to induce panic in an official representative of Earth to prove that humans are dangerously unpredictable. Instead, you discovered we're even more unpredictable than you feared. Vex'dar's breathing apparatus wheezed pathetically. Commander Whelan, I assure you this was merely a scientific. Save the diplomat speak for someone who hasn't just been gassed, Jack cut in. Here's what's going to happen. In 1 hour, the Council reconvenes to discuss human integration into galactic society. You have 2 options. Jack held up one finger. Option 1. Krill files a formal complaint detailing your little chemistry experiment. The Council launches an investigation. Your diplomatic credentials get suspended, and humans get painted as victims of Vex'dar aggression. Public sentiment shifts in our favor. And your fears about human influence growing too quickly become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The minister's tentacles curled in distress, but Jack continued, holding up a second finger. Option 2. You return to the Council and withdraw your objections to human integration. Moreover, you publicly support accelerated integration timelines based on new insights into human adaptability. That's blackmail. Dr. Morville blurted out, then shrank back as Vex'dar's tentacles whipped toward him in a clear shut-up gesture. No, Jack replied calmly. It's diplomacy. You created this situation. I'm simply offering a way for both our species to save face and potentially benefit. Vex'dar's eyes blinked in sequence, a thinking pattern Jack had learned. And what does Earth gain from this arrangement? Beyond the obvious acceleration of integration. Jack smiled. Smart question. Earth gains a Vex'dar ally publicly at least. And the Vex'dar have significant influence in security matters. We could use friends like you. Friends? Vex'dar's voice modulator couldn't quite capture the mix of disbelief and suspicion in the word. Look, Jack sighed, dropping the diplomatic facade for a moment. I get it. We scare you. Humans are weird. We drink poison for fun. We intentionally raise our body temperatures in rooms filled with steam just to relax. Some of us jump out of perfectly functional aircraft for entertainment. I can't promise we won't continue being strange by your standards." Jack leaned forward. "But here's what you're missing. Humans don't just adapt to survive threats, we adapt to overcome them. When faced with danger, sometimes we run, sometimes we fight, but most importantly, sometimes we solve the problem. Your fear gas? On Earth, we'd have turned it into an allergy medication by next Tuesday and an artificial food flavoring by Friday." The minister was silent for a long moment. Finally, his tentacles made a gesture that Jack recognized as reluctant acceptance. "You make a compelling argument, Commander. Perhaps the Vex'dar have misjudged the nature of human adaptability." "Great." Jack clapped his hands together. "Then we have an agreement. You support human integration, we forget about the whole gassing a diplomat thing, and everybody saves face." As Vex'dar rose to leave, his movement was halted by Jack's next words. "Oh, and Minister, the next time you want to understand humans better, just ask. We're pretty straightforward once you get to know us. Trying to trigger our fear response." Jack shook his head with a grin. "That's like trying to drown a fish." The reconvened council session went exactly as Jack had planned. Minister Vex'dar, in a display of diplomatic acrobatics that would have impressed Olympic gymnasts, not only withdrew all objections to human integration but proposed an accelerated timeline. Upon further study, the minister announced, tentacles gesticulating with rehearsed enthusiasm, "The Vex'dar Confederacy has concluded that human adaptability represents not a threat, but an unprecedented opportunity for galactic cooperation. A unique problem-solving approaches could benefit us all." Jack maintained a perfectly neutral expression, though he caught Krill's mandibles twitching in what he now recognized as the insectoid equivalent of suppressed laughter. "Furthermore," Vex'dar continued, voice modulator straining to convey sincerity, "we propose that Commander Whelan join the Council's Special Committee on Emerging Threats, but in where human perspectives could prove invaluable." The chamber erupted into the multifarious sounds of 17 species trying to express surprise simultaneously. The Arbiter's forearms were raised for silence, and the crystalline gavel came down with a resonant ping. "This is a most unexpected development," the Arbiter intoned. "Does the human delegation accept this nomination?" Jack stood, tugging his uniform straight. "Earth is honored by the minister's confidence. We accept." But 3 hours and countless diplomatic formalities later, Jack found himself in what passed for a bar on Harmonia Station. The establishment catered to multiple species with varying biochemistries, resulting in a space that resembled a cross between a laboratory, a spa, and a traditional pub. Jack nursed a synthesized approximation of whiskey that tasted vaguely of batteries, while Krill and Lumina joined him in what had become an impromptu celebration. "I still cannot comprehend it," Krill clicked, sipping something that looked disturbingly like antifreeze. "One moment the Vex'dar are demanding your species be quarantined, the next they're nominating you for the Security Committee." "Diplomacy is funny that way," Jack said with a wink. Lumina chimed softly. "The chemical compound they used Phobaxine is considered among the most potent neurological agents in known space. Many species would require psychiatric rehabilitation after even brief exposure." "And you just inhaled it," Krill added, mandibles clicking in amazement, "like it was nothing." Jack shrugged. "When you grow up where I did, you develop a certain perspective. The industrial corridor of New Jersey wasn't exactly known for its fresh mountain air." A group of diplomats at a nearby table were not so subtly watching their conversation. The word had spread quickly about the human who was immune to fear gas, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. Jack had already overheard one version claiming he had drunk the entire supply and asked for seconds. "What I do not understand," said Lumina, crystal facets pulsing thoughtfully, "is how humans develop such resilience. In most species would have perished or relocated when faced with such environmental degradation." Jack smiled, thinking of Earth's long, complicated history. "We're stubborn, I guess. Plus we get attached to places. Even when they're slowly poisoning us, they're still home." "And now?" asked Krill. "Earth has recovered from its environmental crisis, has it not? Mostly, Jack nodded. We finally figured out that adapting doesn't just mean learning to survive in a toxic environment, it means changing yourself and your environment together. Finding balance. The bar door swished open, and to Jack's surprise, Dr. Morville tentatively entered. The Vex'dar scientists spotted their table and approached with what seemed like equal parts scientific curiosity and residual embarrassment. "Commander Whelan," the doctor's voice modulator hummed nervously. "I hoped I might find you here. There are questions I wish to ask. It's for scientific purposes only, I assure you." Jack gestured to an empty seat. "Pull up a tentacle, Doc. First round's on me." Once settled with a container of bubbling nitrogen cocktail, Dr. Morville leaned forward eagerly. "I must understand, how is it possible that you found our most potent fear agent reminiscent of home?" Jack laughed. "You ever hear of the Bradford pear tree, Doc? Humans planted them everywhere because they looked pretty. Only problem was, they smelled like dead fish and rotting flesh when they bloomed. After a while, people just called it spring. You get used to things." Fascinating. Morville's tentacles wiggled with excitement. A neurological adaptation through cultural normalization, rather than biological evolution. "Something like that," Jack agreed. "Though I should warn you, just because your fear gas didn't work on me doesn't mean it wouldn't work on other humans. We're inconsistent that way." "Most alarming," murmured Morville, but his tentacles betrayed his excitement at this new research prospect. As the evening progressed, more diplomats joined their table. Jack found himself the center of attention as species from across the galaxy peppered him with questions about human adaptability. "Is it true humans intentionally consume capsaicin for pleasure?" asked a fuzzy diplomat from a methane-based world. "Not only that," Jack grinned, "we compete to see who can handle the most. And you expose yourselves to intense sound vibrations for entertainment?" inquired a gelatinous being. "We call it music," Jack confirmed. "Sometimes it's so loud you can feel your organs vibrate. That's when you know it's good." By the time the gathering began to disperse, Jack had fielded questions about everything from human pain tolerance to their baffling habit of keeping predator species as pets. As he prepared to leave, Dr. Morville approached him one last time. "Commander, I must ask, what is it that humans truly fear, if not our most potent chemicals?" Jack considered this for a moment, then smiled. "Mostly paperwork and unread messages in the group chat." Seeing the confusion in the Vex'dar's rapid eye blinking, Jack laughed and clapped him on what he hoped was a shoulder. "Let's just say, Doc, your fear gas might be terrifying to most of the galaxy, but compared to a New Jersey summer in the industrial corridor." Jack shook his head with a nostalgic smile. "That stuff smells like home."